All right, family. We live once again. Iran shuts down the Strait of Hormuz with explosives, bringing a lot of trade, global trade to a standstill. And wow, watch your gas go through the ceiling because that's what's going is already happening. You look up and your gas might be $5, $6. And so, how long is that going to happen? How long, is you intending? I mean, that's going to bring, people going to stop moving. That's going to really slow the econ all the way down. You see, I mean, it's going to be cheaper to stay still than move around. You talking about $5 a man. You talking about $15 to get three gallons in your car? Whoo! 3 gallons for $15. And you be back on E and be back on E in 30 minutes. Man, you can't go nowhere. Feel you and don't even go out the house. You know what I'm saying? If you gotta take some, you had to charge people just to take them around the corner. That's just what it is, man. Everything gonna go up as far as is concerned. And so the food gonna go up because if they're gonna gas everything, the ships, the trains, the trucks, everything run by gas. So in order to get it there, it's gonna cost more. So the food gonna go up, everything is gonna go up. Everything is gonna go up. So where you gonna take? You got to take the money from somewhere. You got to take it from somewhere, and so you're gonna have to take it from the consumers. You're gonna have to take it from the consumers, and so it's very critical. Now, how do you get? You know, you could take the mines out of the. Of course, they got instruments to get the mines out of there. But the fact that Iran is trying to put the mines out there in the water now, the first ship go down. You didn't sunk all of their ships, and so they mad as hell about that. And so they most definitely want revenge for that. They want to knock your ships out the water. They want to bring your economy. You didn't knock their economy out of there. You didn't bomb their oil facilities and refineries, and so they want revenge. You should expect that. They want revenge for that. And so they don't want you to think you gonna come next door to their house and just keep getting money and while you didn't destroy their ability to sustain themselves. So that's what they're gonna do. That's what they're gonna do. You should expect that. So there is no negotiation. I don't know what Trump is really thinking about. I don't. Even though you got a military, you got to have sound reason to go to war. You have to have sound reason to go to war. And the people got to feel like, if the people understand the sound reason, they'll be in unison with you going over there. The soldiers will be in unison. They'll know why they're going to war, and it's for a sound reason. They know. And so, but when you don't have a sound reason and you really don't have a real out, you knocked it once you decided to knock off their leaders, it's time you got to go all the way in. You can't just knock they no, you can't do that. They didn't elected the man. And so who elected that man? The people seem to be okay with him being elected. So people keep talking about the Iranian people. Yeah, it probably is a certain amount of the population that's any nation. Yeah, you got Democrat, Republican over here. Everybody don't agree, but it's enough people in that nation that support that regime. It got to be. It got to be. enough people in that nation to support that regime for it can, I mean, it's 90 million people I mean, they say a Revolutionary Guard is like 200,000. I mean, it's no way 200,000 people gonna contain 90 million people if they want to be free. That's not enough people to contain 90 million. So it's enough of them 90 million that agree with that regime. And so, you keep saying the people that you hoping they do and have a uprising. They ain't having no uprising over there. They ain't doing nothing. Not with you bombing, because you bombing them too. They over there trying to survive. Y'all didn't set their oil refineries. I'm just saying what it is. I ain't, I'm not, you know, I'm not being sympathetic because it just is what it is. You see, that's war, and and they was wolfing, and they was wolfing too. So I mean, you can't be talking and then expect people to have sympathy for that. No, I don't have no sympathy because you asked for it. This is what you wanted. You see, this is exactly what you say you want. And so this is what you got. So you have to deal with it. But on the same on the same note, with the United States being so naive to think that Iran is gonna lay down like that. They're not gonna lay down like that. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna take a whole lot more than what you think. And so, thinking it's gonna be over. It's not gonna be over. It's not gonna be over. You see, it's not gonna be over. You're gonna have problems out of them. They're gonna want mad revenge for uh knocking off this their supreme leader. And the other, the other leaders, they gonna want revenge for that. So you could just sit and wait and try to anticipate any and every attempt to have that revenge. You don't know when it's coming. You don't know where it's coming. That's crazy. They don't necessarily, it could happen on American soil, or it can happen, strategically anywhere in the world where there's a United States assets, you know, and they might want to take it out on the Europeans. It is what it is. They'll pick and choose, what they want to attack, and that's what they'll do. Bring terror to, where people don't want to go nowhere. They ain't gonna want, they could shut down global travel, and because people ain't gonna want to go nowhere because they don't want to get attacked. They don't want to be killed by, going abroad, or people might not want to go to the restaurants no more because they feel that those might be areas of target, or going to the games, the football games, basketball games. Yes. Yes. And so I don't believe it's going to be no negotiation. Where, you can negotiate to let the ship after you done knock the whole damn Navy out of there. Man, you might as well, you know what? It's crazy to me that they would do all of that and not have boots on the ground. And I'm not saying it as if, because that's a move for boots. After that, you got to put boots on the ground. You can't destroy their Navy, blow up half the country, assassinate and not put boots on the ground. That just didn't make no sense. And and it may be, maybe they don't have a sound reason other than, but I understand too that Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. I understand that. I understand that. I understand that. You see what I'm saying? They're just like, you get into it you get into it with somebody, and and they say, "I mean, I'll be right back. I'm going to get my thing." Soon as you say that, it's time to deal with him. Ain't no let him go get his thing and I'll be right back. You know what I'm saying? You going what you gonna let him go off and get his firepower and come back, and because he gonna do what he say he gonna do. So you can't. I yeah. I'm in agreement. You cannot let Iran get a nuclear weapon. I'm in agreement with that. Yeah, I am, because they'll launch it. You know, they'll launch it. That's for real. If they get an opportunity and they in a predicament, they'll launch it. And so, do I want to be the recipient of some Iranian nuke flying over here? We always the beneficiary of these people fighting, and we always the beneficiary. That's just like I was looking at the fentanyl, and looking at, when it started out, it was white people who were the major people. Most of the people that were dying from fentanyl were white people. Then it ended up in black people's community, and then we skyrocketed. You know what I'm saying? We didn't have nothing to do with it, but it finally ended. And then when it ended up in our community, the numbers just skyrocketed. We surpassed, but who's bringing it in? The Chinese bringing it in. Who bringing it in? The Mexican cartel. You see, so when we look at these people always talking about, well, that's unfair. I don't care about that. Do you think they care about us? Do you think they care about the fact that how many of our people is overdosing, and people just don't see, a lot of times they unaware. I don't excuse people. They shouldn't be using drugs, but see, a lot of them, have been using drugs. It ain't kill them. Fentanyl was something so powerful that people didn't even realize how powerful it is. Do you understand how powerful fentanyl is? Fentanyl is over 100 times stronger than morphine. They say a little, like a grain of salt, 2 grains of salt of fentanyl can OD you. You see, a little grains of salt of fentanyl can OD. So people didn't know how strong it was. And then a lot of people weren't telling these people that's what they was using. You see what I'm saying? And so, but by the time people, realize how, at one time, a lot of these people, one time, and boom, they was gone. Not 2 times, the first time they was gone. And so you think they care about us? They don't care about us. So when people get to, I don't side. I just from the outside looking in, I look from both sides, and and I analyze, and I say, I give my commentary on what I see. I don't believe either one of them is, is without, you know, major sin and major, imperialistic, ways of, how people then went on the planet and brought misery and mayhem to people all over the world. Both of them have equally done that. And so, have equally done it. But I'm over here. I'm over here. And so that's, I like I say, I think, for my people, and we can't let them attack here. I don't care. I don't care about nothing else. You see, I don't, because we just need to be able, and it ain't that we agree with policies. We trying to put our people in a position where they can navigate away from this, but we got to exist to do that. You know what I'm saying? So I would rather, for, this country to be victorious, I would. It's not a problem with me saying it, not in any political unity, but The reality is our people need to opportunity to get their head together so they can navigate away. That's what it's about. That our people exist and get the opportunity to wake up before it's too late. You see, and because you always gonna be the casualty. You gonna be the majority casualty. Anything happen, ain't nobody gonna give you nothing. You understand what I'm saying? You done seen every major disaster, and black people didn't get no help nowhere, nowhere. You see, nowhere. Every hurricane, every tornado, every flood, everything get no help. So imagine if something pop off over here. We be devastated. We'd be devastated. So, I always make the best choice for my people, so that they could wake up, and see this for what it is. You ain't got too many more chances to get it together. But you need to navigate. You need to navigate, and Marcus Garvey told us this. Too many of y'all is stuck. You have to have an exit plan. That don't mean everybody gotta go. That don't mean everybody, but you have to have more than one plan. You got to have an A, a B, and a C, and your B should be damn near is exquisite as your A. It shouldn't be, it should be a strong B, almost good as the A, and the C should really be like a B. You know what I'm saying? You got to have more than one plan to navigate on this globe, and so you're always looking for some, where you could go in case of an emergency. That's true. That's real. You know, Even in a tornado, people go to the damn shelter. They ain't gonna stay in the house. They gonna move to the shelter if they got one. If they got one. If they ain't got one, they just have to, they have to hunker in. You see, and that might not be, that might not, but it's the only option that you have if you didn't give yourself a plan B or a plan C. So with Iran putting the bombs out there in Hormuz, man, I don't, I don't see what's gonna come out of that. You know, it's looking more and more likely that Boots is gonna have to go on the ground. And that's gonna be, and do you know what type of planning that takes to really put boots on the ground? You know what I'm saying? You're gonna have to, you know what I'm saying? That's gonna be crazy. That's gonna be crazy because if they come up in that straight, ooh, they're gonna be aiming. They're gonna be trying to get them before they get off them ships. So that's gonna be a fight. That's gonna be a fight. It's gonna be a fight. So y'all get prepared. Y'all get prepared for for the worst. Get prepared to have the soldiers go to Iran and that's going how long you gonna have to fight? How many bodies is it gonna take to what's the objective? How long is you gonna have to stay there to achieve the objective? That's almost I'm just saying that's almost like another Iraq, another Afghanistan. They had to stay over there 15 years in Iraq, 20 in Afghanistan. 20 in Afghanistan. Just imagine that. That's gonna be equivalent. That's gonna be equivalent. So I mean, yeah. Yeah, that's why they wanted. See, another thing, that's why Donald Trump wanted that air base again in Afghanistan. You see what I'm saying? That's why they wanted that air base. He was talking because they would have been taken off right from Afghanistan, flying over Iraq, instead of having to use, because the British didn't want them to take off from Diego Garcia, which, and so, they wanted that base over there in Afghanistan because, man, that's like one of the largest bases, in the world, air bases. You know, they had built damn runways. You see what I'm saying? Damn near 10 miles long. You feel me? But anyway, family, the U.S. still run Iraq back. I believe, yeah, you know they do. They still in there. They still in there. But anyway, family, I appreciate y'all, man. We're gonna move forward. Make sure y'all get over to Patreon and check out the fentanyl epidemic. We're talking about that and the Chinese uh here it is. Let me get it in here. The fentanyl epidemic, Chinese revenge for the opium wars, and Chinese narcotic assault on the USA. This is going to be the next move when they go into Mexico. And they're going. So y'all get ready because it's going to happen, family. I see y'all in a minute. Arm yourself with knowledge. Bang on the wicked beast. Daily liberation through African education and confrontation. Black power.